I had a near-death experience in Singapore by getting stung with about 100 bees. But I would really put it down to it was meant to be, because something had to really shake me off and sit back and ask myself, what do I want most of? I was a very content, happy, fun, playful child, and somewhere in again this so-called rat race, I had become the rat.
Why do you think that really happens to people?
Ignorance, if I really have to put it to one word, that's what it would be. Our education system does not teach us to anchor within, it teaches us to be successful in the world, but not to live out inside out, but just outside. Innovation itself cannot happen unless someone is coming from the subconscious. And leadership is spirituality in action, Vivek, end of the day.
Good evening and welcome to yet another edition of Thinkly Talks. I'm super excited to have with us today Ashu Khanna, a renowned thought leader on spirituality and leadership. Ashu is the founder and CEO of Arc Leadership and has an experience over 30 years as a motivational speaker, leadership coach, author, entrepreneur. A chartered accountant by training, Ashu has formerly worked in Southeast Asia and India across many of the prestigious firms such as Arthur Andersen, PwC, and Kotak Bank. She has been featured regularly in various leading publications such as The Entrepreneur, Forbes, Times of India, Speaking Tree, and is the author of multiple books such as I'm Perfection, Live Life Joyfully, I'm Freedom, Live Life with Awareness, I Am, Life Is, Live Life with Mastery, and to that with love and reverence. So as it's really quite obvious, Ashu is really a multifaceted personality. Let's really try and uncover some of the stuff in our talk today. So with that, Ashu, a very, very warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much, Vivek, for the generous introduction, and honored to be here.
The pleasure is all ours. So Ashu, I think the first thing that really jumps out, is how you moved really from a career, over the last 30 years. You started off in taxation, you started off really being the numbers person, I would say. And then you suddenly had this transformation in your career, right? And then you moved across to what I would say from numbers to people. So can you just walk us through your journey and tell us how did this all pan out the way it did?
So, yes. So here's the thing about CA. I think I would look at numbers more as patterns.
Mm-hmm.
I am very fascinated by patterns. I love puzzles. I love Lego. I love car there's just a fascination. And I think that's what I uncovered as I went along, that CA for me was yet another set of puzzles to be always solved with numbers, track the patterns in that. And as I worked through the various organizations and moved through the various countries and cities, what happened was a realization that transition is a fact of life, and a deep yearning to find how to establish an identity independent of all the transitions that would not get impacted with all the transitions. Right. So somewhere I started seeking how to find that stability in my life. Mm-hmm. And another thing that really triggered this shift was that I had a near-death experience in Singapore by getting stung with about 100 bees. Very, very unheard of to happen in a place like Singapore, but I would really put it down to it was meant to be, because something had to really shake me off from and sit back and ask myself, what do I want most of? Mm-hmm. And asking myself that question, and I was on a sabbatical for a while with my two little sons. And that's when, those existential questions really started haunting me. And I said, okay, I want to figure this out. So I rolled from one entrepreneurial venture to the next, to the next. Within 6 months, 1 year, I kept shifting based on what was what, whether it was something didn't fit my personality, something didn't fit my circumstances or economics, things just kept moving. Came back to India, and one thing that stood out was, obviously there was some dogged fearlessness in me, which could take me through venture to venture. And the second thing that really stood out was that I was always good with people. Connecting with people is something that comes very, very naturally and easy to me. And while working at Kotak Bank in India, I noticed, this was 2005, what I saw was that while leaders were and still are exceptionally intelligent, successful, the humaneness was missing in many. And a lot of it was to do with the fact that everybody's pushed to be technically bright, but not ever made to sit back and focus on their development as a
Right.
person. Now, the organizations I had been through, like Arthur Anderson or PwC, they had a curriculum of our development from the day I joined. It was
Right.
part of the system.
Hmm.
So that's what stood out, that leadership development is really missing. And there needs to be some focus. I had obviously no clue, but yet again, I took a leap of faith, jumped out,
Hmm.
and once again, little by little led me to leadership coaching and recognizing that it's really a calling for me more than just a profession. So it was a perfect switch in that sense.
Great. Would you say, I mean, I didn't know about the near death experience part of your story. And would you say that that was perhaps the turning point, the inflection point that really made you think in terms of the meaning of life and what is it that you really want to do out here and whether you're really in the right profession? I mean, would you say that or that just kind of pushed you a little more?
I think it pushed me a little. It clearly did push me more than many others. But
Hmm.
like anything in life, it's always a tipping point and there are many triggers.
That's right.
So there are just many, many triggers that, where you're seeking I was seeking happiness as well. I was a very content, happy, fun, playful child. And somewhere in again, this so-called rat race, I had become the rat
Hmm.
rather than my own uh, person. And I started really looking for how to find that person and that happiness back. Additionally, I had also joined Bhagavad Gita classes on returning to India in 2004. So I think it
Hmm.
was more like things just came together.
Came together.
There was seeking, which was clearly triggered more deeply by this episode of the
Hmm.
bees. So everything just somewhere converged at some point.
Right.
But yes, that would be an inflection point for me, I think.
Right. You know, Ashu, a lot of time, when you talk to people, especially when you talk to people in the corporate side, right? They always talk about the rat race. They always talk about the fact, like you said, that I was a happy child and I think somewhere I lost my way. Why do you think that really happens to people?
Ignorance, if I
Hmm.
really have to put it to one word, that's what it would be, because our education system does not teach us to anchor within. It teaches us to be successful in the world, but not to live inside out, but just outside. Now, when you live from the inside, you live right and
Hmm.
you're anchored and you're living with your values. Whereas, so it's not as if we don't live with our values because we don't have an inner anchoring. We go out, we go in, we keep swaying. Like they say, there's a sway between joy and sorrow, likes and dislikes,
Right.
insistence, resistance. So there is a constant swaying that happens. And like, till you don't find your center,
Hmm.
that swaying doesn't stop.
So, Ashu, you talked about this whole thing that the focus, education, and, I think even otherwise, if you were to look at some of the techniques, it's all about the outside in typically. It's really focusing a lot on the embellishment, embellishment and stuff like that, right? And you talked about the inside out approach, right? And would it be fair to say that, leadership over the last 2 or 3 decades has actually changed quite a bit? I mean, I remember the training that I used to go through when I was in my corporate life was a lot more focused about some of the Western techniques, about skills, about toolkits. But now, when you kind of go through some of them, more and more leaders are talking really about looking inwards, about being self aware, about consciousness, about really finding that sense of purpose. Uh, Many ideas were perhaps there, probably not so obviously out there. Do you think it would be fair to say that the pendulum seems to be shifting from the Western style of leadership towards the Eastern or the Oriental style? Would there be any truth to that statement?
So I think life is always about a balance.
Hmm.
The Eastern philosophy. So there have been leaders, if I look at the world over, whether it's Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, we've had leaders in all continents and walks of life. Innovation itself cannot happen unless someone is coming from the subconscious.
Right.
That level of innovation that we have seen over last few centuries, and we've really gone very, very rapid on that. The
Yeah.
difference is from it being limited to a few people, it has become the common jargon today.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's been given language. I think earlier it didn't have as much language as it does today. Because when I did my entire, when I was studying the scriptures, for instance, because I was heavily into studying the scriptures, and then I started dabbling with coaching, getting into coaching and all the personality assessment tests, whether it was by Myers Briggs or others. And what I noticed was that the foundation of all these ultimately rests in the scriptures,
Mm-hmm.
or the same philosophy of oneness and understanding humanity. So the West often converts things into frameworks,
Mm-hmm.
and the East tends to be more philosophical in its style.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's that which is coming together, how philosophy and frameworks are really finding that the both actually are saying the same thing, but just possibly in a more, one could be more elaborate and one could be more succinct and sometimes feel incomplete.
Right.
Uh, Even if you look at philosophers, we've had Plato, we've had Aristotle, Lao Tzu, Rumi, there are philosophers globally. So I will not say it's an East and West. Of course, I'm partial to the ancient Vedic scriptures, but I look at them as, when we call them, I look at them as scriptures that go beyond borders. I don't know where the sages lived. So I really look at it as beyond borders. I think they simply gave something to humanity, which is a gift, and we are all reaping it.
Right. You talked about that how when you came back from Singapore, you also dabbled a lot in Bhagavad Gita. Would that be the starting point of your, or should I say, your interest in philosophy, or was that something already there? And then, how did you kind of look at, pulling out some of the elements of that into your workshops, into your coaching, into your transformation? Any
So
thoughts?
I was always very faith oriented, but
Mhm,
my faith was limited to being more of a devotional to an idol rather than based on knowledge.
mhm,
So, yes, indeed, studying the scriptures changed the faith from being blind faith to being transcended to being really scientific, logical, and knowledge based. So,
okay.
I would say the seeds of it were laid in my childhood.
Mhm,
It's as an adult, I really went deeper. Now, when you ask me how did I translate it into my work, I talked about patterns to you. I am very intuitive and extremely quick at observing and connecting dots.
mhm,
Spirituality is nothing but connecting dots. It's
true.
all about connecting dots in life.
Mhm,
So, life is a huge matrix, a huge canvas, and I'm able to connect those dots very quickly. So, when I engage with people, I'm able to connect dots in conversation, in their behavior, in their thinking, in their paradoxes that, like while they say their values are something, but what they're doing could be completely paradoxical. Or while they understand their strengths are one thing, and which happens to all of us, we know our strengths, but we don't even realize when we either underutilize it or overarch it. And
right.
that's where the stress comes in.
Right.
So I think it was a question of it very naturally emerging out of me. And that is how I went deeper and deeper towards spirituality, recognizing it more as a natural talent and a gift rather than something that, yes, of course, I studied,
Mhm.
but it just fit for me. And
I think
leadership is spirituality in action, Vivek, end of the day.
right. You just probably don't realize it in that sense.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Great point. So you've touched upon multiple themes, thoughts, ideas, concepts in your content, whether be it your books, be it your videos. Some of them really struck out to me, and I just wanted you to kind of double down a few of these. So the one that I really found very interesting and which you talked about through your personal experience was, tell us a little bit about the concept of finding one's purpose in life, and why is that so important? Why is that so important to be an authentic leader? Would have your thoughts.
So, in spirituality or in Bhagavad Gita, we say that we all have a certain dharma. Dharma is our inherent duty. Our
Mhm.
inherent duty is to live in alignment with our inner self,
Mhm.
which is nothing but authenticity. Living true to yourself is what is authenticity. So we say it, it's simply that do we do it? Now,
Right.
living authentically is not easy because we are very socially conditioned.
Mm.
So that is what really comes in our way. And the struggle between being a conformist and being true
Mhm.
is where the challenge comes in, where we sometimes have to, and battle with ourselves. It's like Arjuna saying, how can I kill Bhishma Pitama?
Mhm.
Because he is my guru and like a father, grandfather to me, and I can't. But it is a war of right and wrong.
Right.
So it goes beyond just the relationship. And we look at relationships in a very narrow way of the material world rather than the minute we look at ourselves. If you look at, COVID was a great time when we all woke up to or accepted that the interconnectedness and oneness of life is so high.
That's right.
So it's really that.
Yeah.
Now, purpose is something which gives you again a way to anchor. If I look at what is the highest purpose, is being living true to yourself. And when you live true, you find happiness because there's no dissonance in you.
Right.
Now, everybody in every way of doing things, ultimately, even if you're trying to be wealthy, successful, this, that, healthy, it's about being happy.
Mm.
Because when we run towards we do two things in life. Either we run towards how to be happy or happier,
Mhm.
or we run away and how to avoid pain, how to be more comfortable and how to not have any pain. So we are
Mm.
running constantly in these two directions because ultimately we are seeking to be happy.
Yeah.
N- Now, when you accept that happiness is who you are, because you are ultimately that soul, that spark of the Paramatma, and you are ultimately happy, it is simply getting back to your true nature, is when you stop the running around and you come to your center.
Right.
So now, in that finding your center to live that life of being happy, we've all been given a talent,
Mhm.
and we've all been given, this body skill sets which need to stay in action and have the capacity to keep expanding, expressing, and what we call unleashing our potential.
Right.
So to do that is where finding something that aligns with me becomes very, very helpful, because it then I'm always in that joyful state of doing something that aligns.
Right.
Now, not everybody finds their purpose immediately. It's taken me time. Some find it earlier as a singer, cricketer, or whatever, and some find it later. And some, like, if you've read Andre Agassi's book of tennis, Open,
Yeah. Yeah.
while he was a very, very successful tennis player, ultimately he has gone towards helping children.
Right.
Now, our purpose is not our initial phase of life, helps us to discover our talent.
Mhm.
From there, we discover how to serve society.
Mhm.
Success is a very personal journey. Compassion is a journey of serving the world.
Right.
So it's really about moving from success to compassion. And there's nothing that says the two are divorced. It's simply a question of expanding it from yourself to beyond.
Mm. You talked about purpose is really being able to look within and finding that voice of yours, right? The inner voice of yours. And then I've come across this talk by you where you really said that, listen, it's very easy to get confused between your inner voice and your ego, because, and, how do you really differentiate between the two? How do you know that it's your ahankar or it's really your authentic self talking to you? Could you just double down that?
So it's a common struggle. Our emotions overwhelm us, our thoughts overwhelm us. They act as a veil on the inner voice. And the entire play of life is about learning to pierce through, and go deeper, deeper, deeper. It's recognizing that what is reality and what is not. And our body is a fantastically tuned mechanism.
Mhm.
So when you're happy, you are very centered. There's a
Mhm.
sense of calm, peace, what we call bliss or a centeredness you feel.
Mhm.
When you're overwhelmed, you're anxious, there's a agitation, restlessness, and that's how you know that you're not living true. So
Mhm.
the sensations in our body act
Mhm.
as a radar to telling us who we are being.
Right. So listen to the radar, and if you're
Yeah,
worked up, that's probably your lesser self talking to you. And when it resonates with you, that's your higher self. That be a good way to summarize this.
absolutely. See, there's so many things we do in life where we say, I just knew it.
Right.
I intuitively knew it. My gut instinct told me so. It may be contrarian, but we take those decisions.
Right. Right.
And it's about developing that sense of knowing it, that that intuition, to becoming spontaneous. When we say live in the present,
Right.
it's being present to life all the time.
Mhm.
So if I had to really look at Wimbledon that day, for instance,
Mhm.
or cricket,
Mhm.
we've had a lot of series of sports and where there's been. Now, think of it as, Hardik Pandya bowling that last over where the
Yeah.
whole world was going absolutely crazy which way the match will swing.
Right.
It's learning to shut out that noise of the spectators
Mhm.
to focusing on that ball and your talent
Mhm.
and doing your best in that moment, because that's all you can do, because
Right.
you don't know whether there will be a Surya Kumar catching it or will there be a six going for it.
True
So,
that.
honestly, that's really what it is,
You
honing
know,
that skill.
right. And actually on this whole thought about being there in the present and being very authentic, and there are, a few questions on it. I'll just read them out. Vinita is saying that I really want to know a personal story where leading with authenticity made a significant difference in your career. And then Deepak is saying that, like, great insights, ma'am. Can you share a few examples of authentic leaders and key takeaways from your perspective? So, one, I would say your personal example of, working or behaving with authenticity, and some other examples of the other people.
So, I stepped up to be the chapter president of the International Coach Federation in Bombay to set up the Mumbai chapter.
Mhm.
That came as a very inner, urge to say, okay, I've established myself as a coach. There are many people here who are still trying to figure out the journey. I struggled, I got there.
Mhm.
Let's share this with the others and create more clarity and awareness in the market. Now, having not being in a place of wanting to establish my brand, but actually create awareness in the market about coaching, about the profession and the benefit of coaching.
Right.
It was really beyond, so what is it about an organizational vision when you're more focused on the vision than yourself? Now, what that did for me was that in the 2 year tenure that I had, we had fabulous success where we worked first with a lot of NGOs and built leadership capability in it. And ICF has a certain system that if you do something, they have a gift of giving award, so which the Mumbai chapter got. Additionally, I wanted to bring in the Indian chapters together as a find a way to create collaboration amongst them. So letting the each time it was about allowing the other functional heads, so to speak, to take charge of things. So, even when we were doing the project, found somebody who wanted to step up to be a functional head. So, Vivek, normally an organization or not a voluntary organization takes time. I think in a span of 2 years, we established a full chapter sustainable institution with all the functions, because people were willing to step up and work and volunteer, knowing that what am I focused on, and I would give them the room to express what they were good at. I was
Right.
very clear, I can't do it. I can stay with the vision. Y'all deliver everything else.
Right.
So our publication research head with her team came up with the idea of doing a book of coaching stories. And I decided to run with it and say, fine, sounds awesome. We invited coaching stories from all over India.
Right.
And we published a book of 25 coaching stories saying the power of coaching. So, did a lot of unique work which hadn't happened earlier.
Right.
That unique work got the attention of the ICF Global Board, and we had the first time visit of the entire Global Board to India.
Wow.
And not only that, we even had the CHROs flying in from various corners of India to attend that breakfast morning that we had with the board. So
Right.
I think it was just about constantly being very clear, doing the right thing versus doing what works for me. So there were
Great.
two hats I was wearing, but I had to be very careful of which hat am I promoting.
Yeah, that can be sometimes the real difficulty in terms of
Yeah.
being clear. So again, when you talk about leadership, I mean, leadership is always about leading a team. It's always about leading a team towards victory, towards winning. And then again, you've come up with a very interesting contrarian thought somewhere, which says that winning is being okay with failure.
Yep.
And then you've seen some of the leaders celebrating failures. You've got some very impressive organization like Google, for example, where they celebrate failures, right? Do you linger on that point a bit? Really talk us through that aspect about why is it okay to accept failure?
So, firstly, when you talked of other authentic leaders, whether you look at Indra Nui, Sundar Pichai, there are many, many, Anand Mahindra, there are many people who are
Right.
really authentic. Ajay Piramal, Harsh Mariwara, people who are leading a life, a business, doing it with purpose, compassion. They've got a higher calling with it. Now, failure is something which is a given. It's like learning to walk. You cannot learn to walk without falling. You cannot run without once again falling and stumbling and getting up again. And you will not always win
Right.
because in like any sport, there'll always be some team which will win this time or that time. Like, when you look at Djokovic, he was really the reigning star, but here comes Alcaraz, who last time and this time he completely wiped him out in three sets. There's always a lesson in it for us. So, failure is, I call it the stepping stones to success because it's really identifying either what you're doing, you're not catching what you're not doing right, or what you're doing repeatedly and not adapting. It's the opportunity for transformation. And I saw, I was initially like 2-3 decades ago, 2 decades ago, I was very frustrated with not finding what will work for me as an entrepreneur.
Right.
But I think what I discovered was what out of all of those is what was not right for me, what didn't fit for me.
Right. That was
Right.
equally important to know
That
what's
was
in.
equally important to rule out
Right.
what doesn't work for me.
Correct.
So life is actually a journey of self-discovery and self-transformation. It's not a journey of success and winning.
Right.
If you focus on self-transformation as a journey, as the outcome or the core aspect of life, there is always success and always winning because you will transform from every situation.
Right. I was just thinking, I mean, I saw the match too. It was really brutal. Seeing Djokovic get dominated by that is really not pleasant, right? So what's the takeaway for Djokovic? What's the takeaway for Joker, for somebody who's really, over the last, maybe I would say 7-8 years, dominated this place? And now you have young blood like Alcaraz, 15 years younger to him, coming down and winning in straight sets, right? What would a champion and leader take from that lesson? And, what will that stepping stone be?
So humbling, I saw Federer go through it.
Yeah.
And he came back humbled. He came back more human. He came back more gentle and not aggressive. I think the play gets refined. From aggression, one turns to more of confidence. There's always a lesson to say, okay. And also it's about, like in business, it's about learning whether that you should start planning for the future.
Right.
Because succession is a fact of life.
That's true.
So it's not about, do I hang my boots right away? You could still come back and have next 5 years left in you. I don't know. He's all of just, not even 40.
Yeah.
But question is, it's a wake up call to saying, okay, what do I need to do differently?
No, great. I think very, very interesting points. And just shifting gears a bit from this, Ashu, I think looking really at the workplace, I think end of the day, the leaders are all focused about, making a workplace for tomorrow and really ensuring that we are all kind of, future ready. but the workplace itself is just getting transformed, by the minute, right? Uh, COVID came upon, and suddenly this work from home, remote working, hybrid working was a big disruption in people's life. And then now you have stuff like automation and especially AI. And Gen AI in the last 8, 12 months has been phenomenal, right? So people are really asking, like there's this question from Desmond, from Anupama. I'm just paraphrasing that, right? How do you really imagine the people? There's much for us to be humble about now. Now that you see the Gen AI working the way it is, how do leaders and employees of tomorrow start planning right
So, firstly, technological advancements are not going to stop.
now?
That's a fact of life. Organizations have instituted reverse mentoring, many of them. The younger generation is clearly more adept and far more agile with technology than people like me. Whereas I come with experience, they come with agility. And I think it's the marrying of both, which is what is brilliant.
Right.
Second thing is human beings. If you look at, I don't know if you've ever seen this TV show called Downton Abbey.
No.
That is okay. That goes through two world wars, goes through the world war. And what I noticed was it's about moving from the carriages to a car to then faster cars, moving from the, ink and feather, those quills,
Right.
to typewriters, to newsprint and everything. When I started working, we had secretaries, we would write our notes in with hand,
Shorthand.
hand over, shorthand. No, I would write all my entire report in hand, hand it over. She would type it on a typewriter or telex it or fax it.
Right.
There were no emails, there were no personal computers. So even in the 30 years that I have worked, I have had to, move from that the analog phone to a digital, and things have just moved very, very fast.
Right.
We have to adapt. We can't stay stuck. So I think the one thing I would say is that you don't have an option.
Right.
Trying to behave helpless is not going to help us. What all this technology and AI is doing is pushing us out of this whole concept of complacency and helplessness to actually awakening to the leader within. That we all can live like leaders in our life. If we anchor within, we live through, find our talent, and be innovative collaboratively. It's very, very possible. And it is the only way. So, what COVID did was moving from authoritarian leadership or centralized leadership, moved to shared leadership.
Right.
Because there was no perfection. Everybody had to take decisions like this, saying, okay, you're working from home, I'm working from home, let's just move. Learning to work with imperfection, learning to take decisions with speed happens when you are anchored within. You can do all of that because you start understanding that there is no such thing as the perfect answer.
Right.
As we were talking, just as I was telling you that my app has many bugs, and at some point I'm just going to launch it because I can't keep waiting for it to be debugged fully.
Right.
You just, as an entrepreneur, have to take that leap of faith.
Right.
And that's what technology is doing. It's pushing us into ourselves within because the world outside is getting more chaotic.
Right.
So I think it's serving us beautifully by freeing us more and more and more, and giving us time to be contemplative, and giving us time to really sit with ourselves, be mobile, be in nature, work from anywhere. I think it's a blessing in disguise, and that's how we need to see it.
Lovely. Ashu, also you've talked about leadership, and in one place you've talked about, I think even Robin Sharma has a book to that name saying leadership without title. And you've referred to, that phrase in many, in your writings and in your video. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on that one?
So leadership is never a title. It is an attitude. It's a way of being, because only then can I really call myself a leader. Just calling myself a CEO doesn't make me a CEO. Are people respectful of me? Are they inspired by me? And I think that goes so much deeper. It's such a far deeper concept. And that is why today, what is happening on social media? People get called out very quickly.
Right.
So what social media has done is that, and that's why there's even a further shift, because if everything is available on the internet, what do I as a leader have to offer which is not on the internet?
Right.
So it threatens your sense of identity, which earlier rested in a title or knowledge, and then it goes towards you only. The spotlight comes to you.
Right.
So you get called out very quickly, and that's what has changed.
Hmm.
That you cannot not be authentic because
Hmm.
you'll get called out. You'll
Right.
get trolled, you'll get called out, you'll get spammed, you'll be all over the place.
Just moving a bit from here, and I really like exploring your books. You've written, I think, four of them, and could you just kind of, walk us through the thought and behind the themes that you've chosen in those books? First of all, by the way, I love the names. It's more like a phrase, a paraphrase, a thought, a fleeting thought in some ways. So, could you just tell us about the inspiration behind those books and your whole, what should I say, your relationship with the books when you kind of, thought about them?
So I started writing. So as I was going through this whole journey of transformation, which was getting expressed as a coach from the point of view of the karma yoga part,
Hmm.
writing came as a medium of being more contemplative and developing my own clarity.
Hmm.
I started writing, sharing, and I saw it as a great medium to share my insights rather than being limited and staying with myself. Now, coaching again is a very one on one or one to few, whereas writing takes you beyond.
Right.
And from the time I started out as a coach, my whole thing was how could I expand impact? So, writing came as a brilliant medium for that, emerged really. So, I started sharing my insights. Now, the themes of the books flowed from my own journey. The
Hmm.
first one, I Am Freedom, Live Life with Awareness, is really about questioning my perceptions. Because we have so many beliefs which are, as I told you, socially conditioned or otherwise,
Right.
that we don't know what is true. So the book entirely is about my own quest to understanding myself and how do I live through,
Right.
understanding the inner voice, understanding my inner perfection, understanding all of that,
Right.
that I'm born perfect and I don't need to keep on trying to change myself. I need to really
Right.
find myself. My second book, I Am Abundance, the I Am Life is actually retitled as I Am Abundance, Live Life So with Mastery. That one is a lot about as I shed those beliefs, I realized my perspectives were very limited. What we call today inclusion,
Hmm.
oneness, interconnectedness, that's what I started seeing in life. Because once I shed this whole fear of barriers aside, I started seeing life is far more expansive.
Right.
And I started actually embracing the expansiveness of life. And from abundance comes possibilities. So it's called actually I'm abundance, live a life of possibilities. Because when you see life as abundant, you are able to see opportunity in everything rather than get fearful of competition, comparison.
Right.
Then I moved on to, so it was really shedding my attachments. So
Hmm.
that book is about shedding my attachments to relationships and seeing the world as interconnected.
Hmm.
I then moved on to writing a poetry book, so which came as a complete surprise, and I think that was the most childlike expression that emerged, spontaneous. Each poem was written in 30 seconds or 1 minute.
Wow.
Uh, it was, and they follow the entire journey of a person from the quest of what is life, who am I, to how to live life like a leader.
Hmm.
So that is I Am Love, Live Life with Gratitude. Then that which was earlier titled To That with Love and Reverence. And I'll tell you the genesis of how the books have changed the titles. Then I moved on to writing a book called I Am Perfection, Live Life Joyfully, which is the journey of the mind or the unanchored emotions to getting anchored internally, which we call yoga.
Hmm.
So, and now I'm writing a book, I Am Happiness, Live an Inspired Life, because when you live from the inner self, you're always inspired. So it's gone very sequentially with my journey.
Hmm.
And that's how these themes have emerged. And yeah, and I think over time I realized that each book had I am as the assertion
Right.
to the attribute of the higher self.
Hmm.
So I decided to then bring all the titles in sync. with that.
Right. So obviously there will be a lot of inspiration from, I would say, spirituality or some religion or some thinkers. Talked about your brush with Bhagavad Gita, but what else really inspired you? Was it something with Buddhism or was it something with the Vedas? I mean, what has
It
really
is the
been
Ved, so it is the Vedas, which is where the Bhagavad Gita is actually the essence of it.
right?
So it is the Vedas to begin with, but I am very curious. I've read about other religions. I've gone and attended, Sadhguru's Isha Yoga. I will go and do pranic healing. I go and try different things to pick up inspiration or what's the best,
Hmm.
or how can I learn more or differently, different techniques, different tools, different methods. Yes, my center comes back to
Hmm.
the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita, but I go out in nature. I am very much aligned with Ayurveda. So I think you cannot, your core inspiration may remain one, but I would say life as a whole is an inspiration for me. Whether it is spiritual masters, whether it is leaders, whether it is stories I love reading autobiographies. It is books, it is movies, nature, anything.
So after all this quest, about all the reading, and I'm very curious, with your near-death experience, with all your understanding and the books that you've written, what do you think is the essence? Do you think the essence and purpose of life itself?
$1 million question. As I said, the essence is really to live true and in union with the higher self. It is really that. It is understanding that everything is one and I am just another one.
I am that.
Yeah, I'm saying I'm that and I'm just another one like everyone else. So when
Right.
you wake up to this place of I am light, it's not a place of arrogance. It's a place of saying, so is everybody light.
So when you kind of reflect back, two things. What would you like to be remembered as? What's the kind of legacy, you would love to leave behind? And secondly, do you have any regrets in life?
I'll start with the legacy or the regrets part first. There was a time there were regrets. I would say they've all been lessons. I've converted everything into a lesson. I've converted because regret and guilt are always wisdom in hindsight.
Right.
You cannot live life looking
Lovely.
in the rearview mirror. You have
Mhm.
to move forward and you learn, you move on, you will, and I will always stumble. Still,
Mhm.
I am a human being. I will always stumble. So
Right.
it's accept. So I think the place to really be is to accept that you will always be a human being. The two words come together, the human and the being.
Right.
And it's growing into that, really accepting your humanness and living and expressing it as a loving presence. Keep on learning. So if the legacy I would like to have is be a student of life. Life is the biggest teacher, Vivek. It
Right.
teaches you at every corner. And that's why it says live with awareness. Are you aware of what it's trying to teach you now?
Right.
And we don't stop letting go till we die. Even that letting go is when we let go of the body, is also letting go. It's time to
Right.
go and transition to the next realm. It's
Right.
time to transition, time to move on. So it's always about being a student of life.
Wonderful, Ashu. I think this was a fantastic session, and I think it was very, very uplifting. Just listening to you talk about all of this was brilliant. I think the audience loved it. There's some questions I couldn't touch upon, but I think all in all, really loved this whole engagement and would love to chat with you again sometime. Maybe have you back on Thinkly or maybe offline. Yeah, it was a pleasure having you over.
Thank you very much. Absolutely a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Until next time, have a good evening.
Look forward to seeing you. Bye.
Bye bye.